Yes, we are good to go.
Okay. Very warm good evening to everyone. Today, on the seventh day of Itihasa Saptaha, our first lecture and 18th lecture of whole webinar is being given by Dr. Sutapa Das, Associate Professor, Department of History, Banaras Hindu University, Varanasi. Ma'am is going to talk on nation making and gender based violence, the South Asian experience. I warmly welcome you, ma'am, to this session. Thank you so much for being part of this session and agreeing to spend your precious time with us. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. And I also welcome our honorary president, Srinandan Shastri ji, and president, Miss Manali Momaya. And I also welcome all the participants who are going to join us through this session. Thank you so much. Now I request Ms. Manali Momaya to introduce Dr. Sutapa Das, ma'am. Over to you, Manali.
Thank you, dear Nidhi. It's an honor and a privilege to introduce Dr. Sutapa Das on our platform today. And as we all know, today's topic, the theme of this day, and the title of this lecture are all very interesting. Uh, Dr. Mrs. Sutapa Das is an associate professor, as we already know, at the Department of History, Banaras Hindu University, Varanasi. She completed her BA Honours from the Department of History at Jadavpur University, Kolkata, West Bengal. Her MA from the Center of Historical Studies at Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Her MPhil was on a very wonderful, interesting topic. Hum Mandir Wahi Banayenge, Understanding the Ideology and Politics of the Sangh Parivar in the Ayodhya Movement, 1983 to 1992. This MPhil was submitted and awarded in 2006 at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. The topic of her PhD is Continuous Displacement, Bengali Hindu Refugees from erstwhile East Pakistan and their Rehabilitation at Dandakaranya and Delhi from 1958 to 1979. This also was submitted and awarded by the Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Ma'am, the areas of interest are modern Indian history, partition of India, migration diaspora, refugee rehabilitation, gender studies, and so on. Madam has a full-time teaching experience uh, presently at Banaras Hindu University's Department of History, and before this at the Bharati College, University of Delhi for 16 years. She has successfully guided one PhD scholar and five ongoing PhD thesis under her, and also one MPhil has been awarded under the guidance of Dr. Sutapa Das from the Department of Buddhist Studies, University of Delhi. Some of her select publications include Deep Scars, Reading the Impact of Partition of India, 1947 to 1971. Then there is an appraisal of states' role in rehabilitation of unattached Bengali women refugees belonging to the permanent category in gender and empowerment. Some current issues. There is constraints and challenges towards women's education and leadership in India, historical tradition and contemporary scenario in women struggle, survival, and success, and so on. She has, to her credit, several scholarly publications in various national and international level journals and magazines. And she has completed an MOOC course from the University of London on refugees in the 21st century. She is also chaired sessions at the International Conference on Global South Asians Transformative Experiences organized by the Department of History, Banaras Hindu University, Varanasi, in the session called Globalization, Identity, Displacement. And she has organized several national and international level conferences successfully and is also a member of various academic bodies and administrative bodies of the university. She has received Best NSS Program Officer Award of the year 2021-22 She was felicitated by Professor V.N. Sharma, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Arunodaya University, Arunachal Pradesh, in Rashtriya Samvad ceremony at UGC Human Resource Center, BHU, for dedicated service as NSS Program Officer. And a letter of appreciation by the United States India Educational Foundation, New Delhi, was given to her for organizing interactive seminar at Bharati College, New Delhi. Ma'am is a very multifaceted personality, and it is an honor to have you, ma'am, on our platform today with us. We are looking forward to your discourse on nation making and gender based violence, the South Asian experience. I give up the stage to Dr. Sutapa Das. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
So, Manali, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm just opening the video. Can you see me now?
Not yet, ma'am. We can only see a blank screen.
Change the.
Not yet. Not yet, ma'am.
There is some issue with it. Let me just then share the screen.
Sure, ma'am.
Visible?
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
Okay.
Ma'am, could you just go to the next slide once so that we can check whether the slides are moving?
Okay.
No, ma'am, the slides are not moving. Ma'am, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
You just have to stop the sharing and yeah, yes, ma'am, it's moving. No problem. You can start, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. So we all face the technical glitches, but we are all enthusiasts. You are history enthusiasts, so we are all enthusiastic about history and how history has developed, evolved over time. So here today, I'm thankful for your lovely introduction, Manali, and warm good afternoon to all of you who are present. Nidhi, I could see, and Manali, I could see on screen. But if anyone else is there, I would like to thank all of you for being here to listen to my presentation. So the topic that I'm going to present is nation making and gender-based violence, the South Asian experience. So I've put two images, as you can see. One is related to partition and another is related to Bangladesh Liberation War. So the first image, let me just introduce the image to give just an understanding. This image is of a group of women who are waiting to be, kept in camps. And the other image is of a victim of war violence during Bangladesh Liberation War. It's quite graphic, but it hits you hard. But it is a hard story. It is a story which has a lot of struggle engaged in it. So I think it justifies this kind of images. So before going into that, let me just introduce the theme that when I talk of nation making in South Asia, we can see that it is actually entrenched in violence and bloodshed. And I feel two watershed episodes define South Asian nation-making history. One is partition of India in August 1947, and another is Bangladesh Liberation War of December 1971. While anti-colonial struggle leading to independence with partition in India saw prodigious violence, where communities got brutally engaged in revenge retaliation, and it goes for all the three sectors: the Hindus, the Sikhs, and the Muslims. In Bangladesh Liberation War, it was a struggle between military dictatorship of Pakistani junta against East Pakistan's determination to retain its cultural and linguistic identity. So women and other marginalized like transgenders became most vulnerable during this epoch. Their sexual identity and their sexual orientation became crucial and dangerous. Yet women and transgender have either been excluded or made invisible in the traditional archival material of both countries. Through my presentation, I would like to argue that post-colonial nation-making of South Asia acted like in the process, nation states of South Asia actually acted like a benevolent patriarch where there was, hardly any space for marginalized sections, voice, and agency. But there is an increasing realization among social scientists and other, researchers how vital the documentation of these voices is in the context of South Asia. Therefore, my presentation will frame these two periods together to explore South Asian women and also a little bit to touch on transgenders' experience on the violence.
Recording in progress.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, we can hear you.
So I will first focus on partition. But I think before going for discussion, one need to understand the definition of violence and specifically the gender-based violence. And because gender-based violence, differs from the generic sense of violence. For example, most prevalently, violence against women are seen in the form of, sexual assault, molestation, rape, and this kind of, atrocities. So far as transgender is concerned, we can see, physical, sexual, and verbal violence. So what complicates the matter, I feel, is that violence of such kind later on, gets magnified as the victims of such violence are condemned by the society. And so the onus lies on the victim herself rather than on the perpetrator. And these led to long shadows of violence and trauma among the sufferers. When you look into the acts of violence against women at the time of partition of the subcontinent, we can see that it is very unique in its own way. In the colonial and the nationalist ideologies, women are projected as the repositories of cultural value. What I want to argue is this symbolic elevation of women as embodiment of culture and tradition is problematic. It has ironically positioned real women as a target of violent assertion of family, community, and nation. So female bodies, been transformed into what we can say political artifacts. And men of their community tended to end their women's life so as to protect the integrity and honor of their community. Whereas if you look into the men of other community, they were targeting these women so as to defile their body and thus defiling their community and nation. So there were many women who had been abducted and were violently abused. From inscribing tattoo to their bodies, to parading them naked in the sacred spaces like gurudwaras, temples, and masjids, we can see that and also the cutting of breast, which is like very much rampant during that period. We can see that these women faced multiple forms of sexual violence. Some were forcibly absorbed and married by the abductors and were impregnated. Many women either died in the process or they themselves ended their own life. However, those women who were able to survive or go through this trauma became the center of attention, or we can say contention. They were not being welcomed or cared by their own kin people, and they had to hide their identity, suppress their sufferings, and remain in silence. So it is clear that during partition, the communitarian and the religious identities of women became her dominant marker, making her vulnerable to communal violence. And these acts were mediated by the patriarchal value of chastity and purity of women. The identities of being a woman with specifically women of a particular community and religion, we can see got tangled in the chronicles of communalism, violence, and gender. And women's body became a contested terrain of identity, assertion, honor, and hatred. So the question is, what role did state play? State should look after its subjects. So what role did state play? So when we try to look into that, we are seeing that it's very unsettling that in the process of nation making, both the emerging nation, India and Pakistan, tended to define themselves in a very masculine way. And thus, the identity and selfhood of women were denied. And such masculine, nationhood operating within the, patriarchal notion of power, it itself indulges in advocacy of violence, which included both the physical, immediate, and long-term trauma and stigmatization. And here, if we look into the recovery of the abducted women during partition, we can locate how actually state patriarchy has operated. So in this, if we look into specifically the writings of the path-breaking writings of Ritu Menon and Kamala Bhasin and the borders of boundaries, we could see that how they have, shifted our attention to the centrality of women's body in the communalized discourses and practices on the recovery of abducted women by the states of India and Pakistan post-partition. The authors of Borders and Boundaries sensitively attempted not only to put faces in this nameless statistics of recovered women, but also endeavored to disrupt the official narratives of partition through the voices as well as silences of these suffering women. They have also shown through this process how women were subjugated to multiple forms of patriarchy. And this patriarchy goes to the community, family, police, the state. Another path-breaking writing in this genre was Urvashi Butalia's Other Side of Silence. I mean, those who are starting, I mean, this is the book, these are the few books which, anyone want to read about or know about partition, they will start with these books. So, in the Other Side of Silence, Urvashi Butalia, she emphasizes the importance of microhistory and oral history narratives, and she points out it should be this oral history or microhistory should not be treated as sidelined or not so important. In fact, on the contrary, she says or she emphasizes that it is a crucial, it should be treated as a crucial supplementary component. So when we talk about the historiography of partition, we cannot deny the importance of oral history. In fact, oral history, according to her observation, and I also fully agree, that is a space where researcher and subaltern can collaborate to create a narrative and also its supporting context. The facts of the event are not only the important things in oral history. How these facts are, remembered, retold, the emotions, the nuances of speech, as well as the silences are equally important. And it is this oral history which challenges the majoritarian power structure retained, in the written history that helps one to integrate women in the official historical discourse. Butalia's representation of India's partition is extremely, I think, valuable and fascinating because she was able to, situate sexual politics within a discursive nexus formed by patriarchy, religious nationalism, and real politics. And Butalia tried to analyze how the societal construct of the women resulted in her ideological subjugation as well as the colonization of her body. And this represents an attempt at a full-fledged women's history of partition. I'll quote this one para of hers, where she mentions that how the abduction and rape of women, the physical mutilation of their bodies, the tattooing of their sexual organs, the symbols of other religion, these acts had been universally condemned. But no one mentions, or nothing has been mentioned of the violence made by anyone, neither the families, nor the state, nor indeed by the historians. So yet the scale was not small. Virtually every village had similar stories. Along with it, I also feel that it's equally important to situate the conception of selves in the documentation of oral history. How these suffering women and transgenders want to project themselves as victims or survivors or martyrs. It plays a very, very significant role in shaping their expression and articulation. So the way they think themselves and the way they want to project themselves, it comes into their narratives. So this is also important, that how they want to locate themselves within the bigger structure of the gender-based violence. So ashrams, had the special camps were open for the recovered women who refused to return to their previous homes. And most of the time, when the women were pregnant, they had no other option than to go through purification rite called Saptaha, which means illegal abortion at the clinic. The government actually decided to turn a blind eye to it. The problems became, complicated when women who had already become mothers and were unwilling to let their baby go. They would not be accepted back into their families if they brought with them the hybrid child. So the post-abduction children, or the war babies, the way they're popularly known, thus emerged as a serious and sensitive issue after partition. And these hybrid children were perceived as living sign of community's polluted izzat, who unknowingly contaminated the pure, genealogical flow of the community. The Abducted Persons Recovery and Restoration Act came up in 1949 under the aegis of Rameshwari Nehru, and it created a separate category of post-abduction children and tried to restore them to the countries they, quote unquote, properly belonged to. Sometimes even faced with social atrocities, mother would not let their children go, and they had no one else to look after them. They have reasoned often. So there were prolonged debates on whether the child born of Hindu abductors and Muslim women should be given Indian citizenship or Pakistan, and what logic that was to be done. So these debates were going on at that time. So these children who belong to the grey area between two warring communities, and the mothers did not really have a choice other than to, either children had to, go back as the state decides, or, the mother had to leave their children and to get mingled with the original family. So this created trauma both for the mother and the children. So far as Bengal is concerned, the Trauma and Triumph written by Jashodhara Bagchi and Shubharanjan Dasgupta. So also Gargi Chakraborty is coming out of partition. These are all insightful books on partition experience of women on Bengal side. But in the scholarship of Bengal, there is a general agreement that only fear psychosis and no actual violence has happened on women. And I find this kind of argument or denial problematic. In fact, in the book, The Prolonged and its programs, testimonies on violence against Hindus in East Bengal, 1946 to 64, A.J. Kamra has shown how both communal and gender violence unfolded in the village after villages in East Bengal during the days of partition. In my own opinion, and in my own experiences, I've, during my PhD research, I've conversed with many PL category of Bengali Hindu refugee women. And through that experience, it became clear that violence and abduction was very much in existence. So I think we need more ethnographic research to the tune of Ritu Menon, Urvashi Kutali, and Veena Das to bring out the hidden violence on women on Bengal side. If we look into Bangladesh, we can see that violence on women of similar nature also was witnessed during Bangladesh Liberation War. There were instances, as per media report, that East Pakistani women will be taken up and tied up with each other and carried in trucks to desolated place where they will be, then segregated according to their age groups, and those in the, childbearing age will be then taken to the nearby rape camps. And the army commanders gave orders to their soldiers to impregnate these women. The main idea behind all these atrocities was to produce a Pakistani loyal to their nation and religion. According to the official estimate, around 2 to 4 lakh women were raped by Pakistani military during the liberation war. So I'm still doing research on this, and two of the books, in fact, I found very informative in this regard. One is Jahanara Imam's book, The Days of 71, Ekatture Din Guli, and Anisul Haq's novel, Freedom's Mother. This is the English version. The original version was written in Bengali, and it was titled as Ma, this mother. So both these books sensitively, represents the untold miseries and sufferings of this, sufferings of the entire Lords. I mean, whosoever has suffered during this period, including women. And if you look at the Liberation War Museum in Dhaka, where I have recently visited, also conserves records of violence, death, and rape of 1971. So women has, if you look into their role, what role they have played during the liberation movement, we could see that they have played a very, very pivotal role as combatants, as informants, as nurses, and even more. And they have also, given the shelters, they have hidden the weapon, they have risked their lives, and they have also given their son for the, for their contribution. Is it visible? Just a sec. Can you see it?
Yes, ma'am, we can see it.
So you can see that women's body has been used as a politics of war during liberation war of Bangladesh. But if you look into their contribution, you can see that compared to that, their role has been largely ignored and denied and misconstrued in the mainstream society. Especially when you look into the case of Viranganas, this is the epithet given by the state, and when you look into their experiences, we see that through this type of title, they have father actually stigmatized and sexualized them, so they can be now isolated, and they felt they were ridiculed in the society, and they felt all the more marginalized. In fact, Yasmin Saikia's book, Women, War, and the Making of Bangladesh, in 1971, demonstrated that gender-based violence and experiences has been similar in nature to the partition violence, and we just like in partition violence. If you only look into the official document, it is not enough to understand the people's experience of partition. Similarly, in Bangladesh also, only the defined set of official documentary is not enough to understand the gender-based violence in the Bangladesh liberation war. So, so she has critiqued this kind of dependency only on the official history to understand the nation making process, and she has asked us to look into the historical invisibility and to create a new lines of inquiry in her analysis. And she asserts that in 1971, what we experienced is like an unfulfilled mission of violence happened in partition. It was unfulfilled, and it has came to its full circle during the Bangladesh liberation war. So she asserts that in 1971, the South Asia experienced a very different kind of war. It is not only a civil war and an international war, but it is also a gender war. So the collective memories that serve to dislodge official nationalist historical analysis cannot be merely an account of, I feel, heroic deeds of a community. They have to take into account the success, and as well as the moral dissolution, the moral unfulfillment, that or the moral morally they could not, they were indulging in violence. So the disillusionment in the past, which is reflected in the gender-based violence, all this should be included. We should not only our narrative only speak about the success, the independence, but also the, the fragmentization and the sufferings that has went underneath. And it is through this kind of, sensitive dealing with this nation making process that we can, recover humanity in the face of untold suffering. One thing which I also feel important is the matter of quantification, because quantification I feel is critical to indicate the magnitude of violence during war. And this quantification and numbering actually functions symbolically to provide legitimacy and signifies a historical, political period shaping a collective memory for its new nation building agenda. In fact, when Bangladesh was constantly declared, looking at the type of atrocities and violence committed by the Pakistani junta, Bangladesh regarded it as a genocide, but Pakistan constantly denied it. But it is, if we are able to quantify how many people died in the process, then we can easily establish the proportion or the scale of violence that has been, occurring. So quantification, I think, is very important. We often say that quantification cannot capture the, the nature of violence. That is true, but it can actually make us realize the proportion of violence that is unleashed. So within that, if women or transgender are facing, gender-based violence, so the more the proportion, it means greater number of women and transgender are facing, subjugation. Some of the, people are now, there are very less work. Manali told me to include transgender, but I could see very less work on transgender, be it in partition period or in the Bangladesh liberation war. Some short films are coming up related to transgenders, experiences in partition period, and in the Bangladesh also people are coming forward, and there are material where people have were able to the shame or the they were feeling because of the being a transgender. They were able to overcome that and come, and one of them who has served in the Bangladesh Liberation War, he has come up and he was narrating how he had to hide himself when because he was feeling social seclusion when people came to know about his sexual orientation. Even the certificate that was given to him as a freedom fighter was taken back, and it is more than 50 years has passed, and now he has resurfaced to tell his stories. So people are taking time to gather courage, because they face so much of discrimination, be it be women, be it be transgender. So we should provide them the space and provide them they should given the courage to express their pathos, because it is through them that the nation making process became possible. So so I'd like to conclude that in order to understand gender-based violence which operated during partition and Bangladesh liberation war, we need to understand the interlinkage between representations, violence, and identity. How the identity politics, occurred along communal lines, which creates the image of the others and then versus us. It creates and in this process, we try to normalize the violence. We are doing it because they are others and they are not us. So this kind of interplay of discourses of identity, nationalism, which you can say, and violence, actually, I feel acquires greater lethality within the complexity of state. When state professes this kind of, patriarchy or heteronormativity, which we say, this becomes all the more lethal. So we should be, so state's role is very, very crucial to understand. And women and transgenders experience have hardly received, substantial space in the conventional official archives of both countries. And it is still in a very, very nascent stage. Research related to women, research related to transgender or even children These are all in the nascent stage, and more we need more ethnographic work to bring out the full picture. And both India and Bangladesh is doing it in their own way. But what I feel is that since this nature is so similar, we should take both of them together and try to understand the process of nation making in South India, because how their experiential archive, how we can create experiential archive out of that, and create an alternative understanding of the entire process, because we share, we have a shared history, shared culture, but we also have the shared history of war and violence of South Asia. So we should accept that and work on that, and we should be able to bring out more ethnographic research to make a more nuanced understanding of the South Asian nation-making process. So this is my take on gender-based violence which has happened in South Asia. So over to you, Manali.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was really something new for us as students of history. We have studied the modern Indian history as a paper, and we do know about the Indian national movement, and we also have talks and discussions about women freedom fighters. But we end our story there. We do not go further after the independence. What happened after the partition? Our story usually ends at the um that India got independence on 15th August 1947, and that's it. So this is something which we are hearing. Maybe we have heard it here and there, some little small fragments of it. But the story that you presented us today was really, um, I don't know. I don't have words to express. It's always so sad because whenever there is a war, whenever there is some natural calamity or something, some distressful situation for the society, women, children, and marginalized groups like transgenders, they take the hardest hit.
Right. Very true.
This has always been the case. Um, I just, if I may ask a question, ma'am,
Yes.
why is it like when this concept of, because in the earliest times men and women maybe there was some amount of some extent of equality between men and women, and they had
Right.
equal rights to express their sexualities.
Mm.
When exactly or what time period did things start to change where women's sexuality and purity became one with each other, and then women were being used as instruments of demeaning each other's communities?
Thank you for the question, Manali. Uh, if we look into the history and if we look into the earlier stage, in the hunter-gatherers period, men are indulged in hunting, women are gathering. But this is an occupational-based, distinction of labor. But over time, I think the urge to capture, urge to become powerful, that came up, especially with the the property rights and all these things are coming up. So there's a greater urge for when there was a common pastures or common land, you are living in a shared living, you are sharing with each other. Whenever there is a hierarchy where individual can possess the property and they can become more powerful in the society, then you try to acquire more and more power. So women are the one who was subjected to, they were sidelined in the process and they were subjugated, and gradually we could see that they were pushed into the domestic sphere. Now we realize, when we look into the writing of Betty Friedan and others, we can realize that nothing is personal or nothing is domestic. Even the domestic issues are equally relevant. I'll digress from my topic, but because these are all contemporary issues, and it's very specific to my one, but it is in generally a past. So, for example, if we look into the contraceptives, so we can see that this was or the how many children women were impaired. These are all internal domestic issues at one time, but from the time feminism came up and the awareness and gender conscious, especially from 60s and 70s, we could see that women became aware, and not only women, all the humanities got aware that these are no more the domestic issues. These are the issues through which state is getting affected, because what will be your population depends on how we'll make policy out of it. Everything is linked, and these are all which is a public thing. So be it be policy making, be it be winning the elections through the votes of the women. So these public, the so-called the private domain has not remained the public, no more the public domain, the private domain. It has come into the public, and people are increasingly realizing that this kind of dichotomy between the public private is artificial. So yes, I think you cannot actually put date to it specifically in this country. It has happened because across nation it has happened in different periods of time. But what is, I think we should be looking forward is that from 60s, 70s onwards, the way the awareness has come up and way we are countering this kind of suppression of power. That we should celebrate, and we should look forward to acquire more and more power, which the power means, I think two kind of powers plays a very important. One is, you have to acquire political power, which you can do through various kind of governance or various kind of petitions. Another is legal protection. I was going through Manmohi Basu's presentation, and she was showing how the legal rights are so paramount, so important. So in this manner, we are progressing, but we also need to work over the various kind of violence that the women and others have suffered, so that we can make a more human understanding of the changes that is happening in the world.
Absolutely, ma'am. There should definitely be more awareness of the legal powers that women have. It's not as if we do not have any legal protection, but many a times women women are not aware of their legal protections of their rights. And creating awareness of those rights is also as important as creating new laws which protect women.
In this regard, just a little intervention. In this regard, I could say that sexual harassment at workplace, it has been now, previously it was named other ways. Now it has sexual harassment at workplace has become all the more stringent. But many of us working in the public sphere are unaware of the rights that has been given to us. So we should be aware of to avail those rights.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. And as we are talking about gender-based violence, and in context of war and partition, it is interesting to note that the basic mentality or the fundamental thought process has not changed. Even today, when there is some issue between two communities, the first threat that comes out is, we will rape your women, we will rape your wives and your daughters.
Yes.
That kind of mentality, even as things as small as cricket matches have
Yes.
such kind of expressions coming from the viewers. If a cricketer does not perform well in one particular match, he gets rape threats on his daughters and his wives.
Yes.
So it is very, very sick, the sick mentality of our society as a whole.
Yes. Yes. True.
There is a question by Mr. Sukhdev in the comment section, ma'am.
So if you can please read out.
What is the case of Marich Jhapi massacre?
Massacre,
Marich
okay.
Jhapi massacre of 1979. Was it state-sponsored violence or miscommunication among the agents of state?
It's not related to gender-based violence, but since I've worked on it, I can talk about it. Marichapi incidents actually is a state-sponsored violence, and it was, refugees who came from 56 onwards in Bengal region, they were shifted to various parts of India, and Dandakarni is one of those areas where they had been shifted. And this was an extremely forested areas, and they were not able to adjust to those kind of topography, and the the people with whom they were made to live, they were tribal people. They had a very different kind of lifestyles. So it took a lot of time for them to adjust to that kind of situation, and it was the initial phase in 79. And when the CPM government, I should, they promised a lot when and they came in Dandakarana, they were constantly propagating that when they will come to power, they will provide space for them. So that the expectation rose over time, and when they actually got power, so people thought that we can now go back to Sundarban, and if we make our own living out of our own initiative, then state is going to support us. Now here you have to understand, when we talk of a political party, we talk of it in a uniform manner, but it is not so in reality. Within the political parties, there are urban people, urban elites, and village groups. So here we could see that the urban people or the urban elites within this political party, they were little worried that if we allow this kind of people, this kind of settlement, then the people who had been settled in other parts, like in Dehradun, they were settled, and in the other forested areas also in Bihar, also Betia and other areas, they were settled. In Andaman and Nicobar Islands, they were settled. So they will all come back, and then already the space of West Bengal is, Bengal is truncated. Now it is half. Okay, so after this partition, so how will we accommodate them? So all this fear has actually maybe made state to take this kind of decision, but the way the attack has been done on them, it was inhuman. And after that, still Morichapi people were still thinking that they could one day settle in Morichapi, and Morichapi is a Sundarban area which is nearby Bangladesh. So if you are not able to go to the home, you will always try to live nearer to home. At least that will give you certain feelings that at least I'm nearby. So all these emotional things were there among the refugees. But after 79, when this Morichapi incident happened, they could realize that that they have to settle in Dandakarna itself. And with that, I will also say that it is not that every refugees from Dandakarna actually flown to Morichapi. There are certain sections who are not satisfied with the rehabilitation project or the land that they have got, that they decided to leave the land. And after that, when they settled, if you go now to Dandakarni, you can see that it is just a replica of Bengal. I mean, they have this, the rice harvest and everything, and the paddy field, and they are trying to develop it just like a Bengal land. So obviously, the settlement came only after this kind of atrocities like Morichapi.
Thank you, ma'am, for the answer. If I request, if any of the other participants have any question, you can unmute yourself and you can speak. If Nidhi wants to add on anything.
It was really wonderful lecture indeed, of course.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for opening up such new things in front of her, because of course we are in 21st century technologically evolved modern society, but internally lot of biasness is there, still rigidness is there, orthodoxy is there, and many of them don't open up. So thank you so much, ma'am, for so elaborately explaining these things. Thank you, ma'am.
It is very difficult to break the silence, but once we initiate it, because I can just share my own experience of data collecting. When I went for the first time to a refugee village, they didn't allow me to enter the village. They were thinking me as some representative from the government. But once I could convince them, they really opened their hearts. So the new researchers who are working on it's a challenge to break that glass ceilings. And once you can break that, then you will get a lot of stories and you'll be able to make a greater understanding of the sufferings and the contributions.
Yes, ma'am. And it is important that these stories come to light because without these stories, our history is incomplete, and it has
Yes.
so many gaps in it. When half of the population has been completely neglected for
Yes.
over such a long period of time. So
Yes.
you are doing a great job in bringing out these stories, ma'am. Our congratulations to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, all of you.
Thank
I
you,
could
ma'am.
see Manali Basu ma'am, Dr. Kushal Singh, and Samita Rai. Thanks to all of them for patiently hearing the talk.
Yes, ma'am. As we have the next session in line, we will have to come to the end of this session. So I take this opportunity to propose a vote of thanks. I thank you, ma'am, on behalf of myself, Nidhi, and our honorary president, and the entire team of the history enthusiasts for joining us in this webinar and for giving this wonderful eye opening lecture. Ridhima Narayan writes, yes, ma'am, researching in such fashion indeed changes the history itself by presenting the reality and going beyond state based dynamics. Very true, Ridhima. Once again, my thanks to Dr. Sutapa Das for being with us here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I also thank our honorary president, Shri Nandan Shastri sir, and vice president Ms. Nidhi Katti, our seniors, Professor Manmai Basuji, who had joined us yesterday, and everybody else, all the other participants. Thank you all very much. Our next speaker is Dr. Minakshi Dubey Pathak, and she has already joined us. So, without ending this meeting, I think we can jump into the next session. I will just need a minute or two to process the live stream.